Hello, Art Sodermark, Platinum Engineering and Safety, here to talk to you about personal protective equipment. Today I'd like to speak specifically about hand protection. We take the use of our hands for granted, also use our hands to get our jobs done. Obviously, they're indispensable as far as our everyday life is concerned. But do we necessarily take the time to protect them from heat and cold, punctures, scrapes, cuts, other wounds like that, chemical exposure, that sort of thing? If we agree that we don't, let's take the time going forward to make sure we do a better job. And our glove selection, our personal protective equipment, is part of that process. So, all kinds of different gloves out there. As time goes by, more and more gloves readily available to us. Some inexpensive, some not so much, depending on what your needs are, needs of the situation, what your personal desires are, as far as construction and material, etc. So, plenty of gloves out there to protect us from cuts. Many work gloves nowadays have Kevlar items such as that to make them cut resistant. We have our own leather gloves that we've always had access to. Some cut resistance, some abrasion resistance. Surely, if you're dealing with sharps, you may want to go to a cut resistant material like a Kevlar. That also might help you with the puncture side of things. So, back to the leather gloves. We use them for a variety of things. You know, they protect us from a moderate amount of heat. They do a pretty decent job protecting us from rough objects. Moderate protection from blows, getting hit by things, maybe not necessarily from a direct blow, but also protect from sparks. They're a good choice when we're using grinders, that sort of thing. Not a lot of heat protection, although some. All kinds of fabric gloves out there. You might sacrifice some dexterity with the sturdy gloves and the leather gloves, but you might need or gain a little bit of that dexterity back when you're using a fabric glove or something like a mechanic's glove. Going to protect you from minor abrasions, chafing, slivers. Might keep your hands clean in some cases if you're using something as simple as a cotton glove. Not a whole lot of protection from rough sharps and heavy materials. Seen a lot of gloves nowadays. Cloth gloves, they go an extra level and they'll put a coating on there. Sometimes that coating is for slip resistance. Sometimes it's to make the glove itself a little more abrasion resistant, therefore protecting your hands from those abrasions. Some of it is for chemical protection. Anyway, whatever it happens to be, remember our hands are very important. Therefore, our gloves need to be equally important. What do we have to do to make sure that we have what we need to protect our hands? We know we will likely continue to work in the absence of a glove. So, one, they need to be readily available. The right glove for the application. Some of you that have been around a while know that at one point in history, you were lucky to have one glove, right? You had an old leather glove, or maybe a couple different varieties of leather gloves, and that's what you had. Some situations they work great, other situations they didn't work well. So there were times when you were working unprotected. Not the case anymore. I know if you were to look in my safety bag right now, there's probably 6 different style of glove in there, from chemical protection right on up through relatively inexpensive leather gloves for general use, and everything in between: shock resistance, high vis, not so much, mechanics gloves, etc. You get the idea. So important for us when we're doing our pre-task, when we're taking a look at the job ahead of time, planning ahead. We have these things available to us. In some cases, it goes into our job planning, depending on what we do, particularly on the chemical side. We might have to have a quantity of disposable gloves. Most gloves for general hazard protection aren't disposable, but then again, they might be. Should they be contaminated or susceptible to cut and significant abrasion. So let's slide into the chemical protection side of it briefly. So more specific, right? There are times we need to protect our hands from chemicals. The variety of gloves does come into play more specifically when we're talking about chemical protection. Not every glove or glove material is going to protect you from all chemicals. So what is adequate, what's not, what gloves do you choose? Rubber, nitrile latex, natural rubber, neoprene, all different types that are out there. So where do you go? What do you choose? All dependent on the application. What chemical do I have? And according to that glove's manufacturer, what will it protect me from? So you've got to put the effort in. Someone has to put the effort in. Generally, this information comes from the employer. Employer does a hazard analysis, aware of the chemicals that they have in their workplace, assign the gloves, buy the gloves that are required to protect from that particular chemical. Now, where does that leave us? You're in a space where multiple chemicals are present. Multiple gloves are available. You have to know which one to choose. Now, granted, there's going to be some training associated with this. Hazard communication training covers PPE, HAZWOPER, hazardous waste emergency response, cover PPE relative to chemicals. So the glove selection comes out of training. Not going to talk specifically about it here. One thing I will say, though, is very much like a general hazard glove isn't going to protect you from all hazards. We have to remember that a chemical glove isn't going to protect you from all chemicals. Specific example, many of us are familiar with acetone and what its uses are. Generally falls into the solvent category. Natural rubber is a really good glove choice for acetone. Xylene, on the other hand, also firmly seated in the solvent category. Xylene degrades natural rubber readily. So we have to be careful. That's an example of how that works. We also have some gloves that are not recommended at all for particular chemicals. So where do we go? We go to the glove manufacturer's information. We may not get to that point first. You may start out on a safety data sheet. Safety data sheet gives PPE recommendations where it will say, choose nitrile. Well, then you can go find manufacturers of nitrile gloves or whatever material the manufacturer recommends. There is also, if you want to go to OSHA, OSHA.gov, there's a publication on PPE. Specifically, it's number 3151. And within that publication is a chemical resistance guide. So in certain situations, you may not find the ideal material, but you'll find a suitable material, and perhaps it's good for a finite period of time. Well, you can factor that into your work plan to change gloves as needed. So to recap a little bit, we take our hands, or the use of our hands, for granted. In order to improve on that, one, acknowledge the fact that we do. Two, let's talk about ways that we can protect our hands. One of the ways is to use personal protective equipment, and that is in the form of gloves. General hazard gloves, lots of choices. Chemical resistance, also lots of choices. Have the gloves available. Factor that into your hazard assessment pre-job, and wear them. Your hands will be better off because of it. and your ability to continue to work, perhaps even extend a career, will come along with the functionality of your hands. Thanks for watching.